Welcome back. Westernacher Consulting company in the services industry and a partner of SAP embarked on a journey to become carbon neutral, and in the process, based on the recently converted S/4HANA ERP system and past success with SAP Analytics Cloud, built a solution to help them analyze and monitor their carbon footprint. This is their story, and Russell Saad and Mark Mrosek will do us the honor. Russell?
Great. Thank you very much, Didrik. So today, I and my colleague Mark Mrosek, we're from the Westernacher practice Business Planning Analytics, are going to be talking about how our company has been using SAC to push our sustainability to become carbon neutral. So let me bring you into what we're going to be talking about today. To start off with, I'll just tell you a little bit about us so that you can actually understand why we're going to be doing what we're doing. So this is actually some good background information. I will then explain what our actual plan is and how we're going about modeling our carbon footprint. So you'll also see then why we're doing it and how we're doing it. But that would be rather boring if you just see slides. So Mark is at this point going to step in and actually show you a live demo of our version of a carbon footprint monitor in SAC, and then walk you through how we're measuring particular and calculating particular carbon emissions, after which I'll explain something about the technology and the theory behind it and what our next steps are. Of course, we're leaving a little bit of time for a Q&A session, and for that, we've actually got Oliver Blau with us. He's one of our directors, and he is the sponsor for this entire initiative from the management team, and so you can hear it from the horse's mouth. So let me begin. Who are we? Well, Westernacher is a company of about 850 experts, and we're all consultants, really. We've been going for a little bit longer than the SAP. We were founded in the town next door. And so as we've been slowly working and growing over the years, we've ended up coming from the same kind of background as SAP, very much tied in with SAP's own solutions and the consulting around them. So these days we're an SAP Gold partner, and believe it or not, we're still acting as though we're just a small group of consultants who got into the business because they enjoyed doing this. So we might be a great number of people around the world, but at heart, we're a small employee-owned consultancy with partners who do what we enjoy doing. Now, what do we actually stand for? Obviously, we're very keen, like every IT consultancy, we're in it for the technology, it's interesting. We like playing around, learning, pushing the boundaries. And here we're coming into a little bit of our company culture. We might be bigger, but think of us as a group of people who are very much in this for some very good reasons. So quality, actually delivery, working with our customers, and by being employee owned, we've got a sort of collective thing. You can keep coming back to us 10 years on, 15 years on, 20 years on, you'll find the same people. So we have this very long-term relationship with our different customers. It's as if we're just a small consulting practice. We've got that kind of real hands-onness. And part of our values is, of course, sustainability, because we want to do what's right. And so doing what's right is getting a little bit complicated. Nowadays, we've got to look towards the future, and looking towards the future, we have got, as the rest of the world, we've got to enable it to take place. We've got to reduce the damage we're doing. And so for us, the obvious thing here now is going to be, how on earth can we join, say, our clients in reducing our carbon footprint? Now, Our clients could be manufacturing companies, they could be service providers like us. They're in all over the world. They are going to be looking at their own value chain. So their value chain, as I said, it might be production. They might be a large chemicals corporation. They might be a fashion retailer. So what they're looking at is not necessarily what we would be looking at. We're a consultancy. So this is the kind of value chain that we're covering. So we cover the entire possible value chain. We cover all the SAP solutions which are there. But this is the key takeaway. We're consultants. We're also people who develop our own software. We develop our own solutions, but how do you actually go about looking at what our carbon footprint is? Because we don't have a production line anywhere where our solutions or our consultancy hours roll off. We've got to do this a bit differently. And just to make the point again, when we're looking at our footprint, we're not just a German company. You're talking to a couple of people from the Heidelberg office here. We're all over the world. So we've got a presence on, well, practically every continent. At least we're working it with some of them. But by covering every single time zone, by being in 19 different countries, we have got to also look at this globally. It doesn't matter if we do whatever we do within Germany, we've got to consider the UK, Spain, the People's Republic of China, India, the United States. We've got offices there too. And this is why I'm coming into this. So what would carbon neutral mean for us? We're a consulting company. Well, let's just take our brief from upper management. And this is something which has got buy-in from the highest level down to all of us. Not that we really have levels. As I said, we still act as though we're a small consultancy. We're not really hierarchical. But this is a statement of our shared value and commitment here. We want to reduce our emissions. That's an obvious takeaway. We've got to. And there's some urgency there. Whether or not it would come from us, it will come from outside. Our customers are already asking us what we are doing for sustainability, what our plans are. We've also got potential legal implications, where it is extremely likely that within the coming year, the German government or the European Union will expect us to document what we're doing. And that's why our starting point has got to be, whatever we want to do, we've got to find out what our emissions are. So this is the transparency. We need to know what they are. Once we know what they are, then it should be a no-brainer that we're going to look at the three main areas, the three main causes of our emissions, and take action. I mean, our goal is to become carbon neutral mid to long term, but before we can make a plan, we need to know what we're talking about. Now, as I said, we're a consultancy, so we don't have a production line anywhere, but we've got people, and our people need equipment to work on. So the basic needs of a consultant might be their laptop, their cell phone, and maybe a big monitor. Now that is already quite a bit. We don't really have that much more. What else might we have? We might have our offices around the world. And so those offices need to be heated. They're going to have utilities, water, electricity. We've got to plug our laptops in somewhere. And then, of course, we have to visit our clients. So if we're going to be visiting our clients, we're going to be traveling. Now that could be local, it could be on foot, which is kind of unlikely. Bear in mind, we do kind of cover the entire globe. So that travel is going to involve cars, buses, taxis, bicycles, e-scooters, and of course, aeroplanes. So there's no way we can actually just take a ship across the Atlantic. It would take far too long. In our case, we'd have to fly. So if we're looking at these particular kinds of emissions, how on earth do we account for these? Well, bear in mind we're an SAP heavy consultancy. This is really our core competency. So of course, immediately we go to our S/4HANA system. This is where we would be recording all of our expenses as a company. So financially, of course, every office expenditure, all the utility bills, they're going to be there. All of our travel costs, we're going to be booking those in using our online tools, and they're available there. We also know who's working for how many hours and where. This is straightforward HR information recorded in CATs. So the tools we use, for example, Concur in North America, Raidu in Europe, these are simply ways in which we're recording what our consultants are spending and doing and booking them into our IT systems. Now, once things are in S/4HANA, it is dead easy to get the information into the analytics cloud, and that's where we're going to be building our monitor. Since we're going to have to be doing a few clever things there, bear in mind, at no point are we actually booking in kilograms of carbon dioxide. I'm sorry, no, we don't have that in S4 out of the box, because we're talking about euros and dollars and kilometers and hours. And the actual calculation to work out what this means for our carbon budget is going to happen somewhere, and that's going to be the analytics cloud. So let me give you an example here. So normally if I were to travel to a client, if I were to go by car, okay, I'm going to be recording the kilometers I've traveled by car. That would be in our booking system. And that is something which I could pull out of S/4HANA. Now, to actually know what emission that would represent, I would need to have a calculation done somewhere. And this is where the analytics cloud comes in. To convert this, how many grams of carbon dioxide per kilometer am I actually producing with this? Now, we can look this up. There are online sources, and that's precisely what we'd be doing here. So in Germany, we'd be able to look up the average. And at this point, we could calculate what is the footprint of this extremely long journey. It gets a little bit trickier, however, if we don't have something so obvious. Now, everyone typically would record travel by car by kilometers because you might be reimbursed by kilometer depending on the country and the conditions you're in. Now, a flight, however, we typically have recorded just the cost of flight. So let's say I fly to the UK. It might be 250 euros. Great. S4 knows it, but what on earth does it mean for my carbon footprint? So in this case, we'd actually need to know a bit more. We would need to know from where to where was I flying. And so this is information which we'd have to record as well. And it's perfectly feasible to get that. So if I know the locations and I've recorded those too, then that's another calculation we can do. We can then work out, again, we have online sources. We could simply have a huge reference table which lists the kilometers between A and B. And again, we look online, what is the average carbon cost per flight per kilometer? We put the calculation through and we've got it. So this is the magic there. To start off with, however, we weren't able to do this out of the box. We began with a prototype. We first needed to see what was feasible and was necessary. And this is where the SAC, the Analytics Cloud, helps us. It's dead easy to take a spreadsheet that you put together and just feed it in, build a model, build graphs, and this enabled us to do a sanity check on what we wanted to achieve. So our prototype was based on Excel data, which we quickly turned into a dashboard, and that showed us what we needed to do next, after we actually had to do the manual effort of calculating out all of our travel locations and costs and times from previous years, we realized we need to have that online. And that is where our real monitor starts coming in. It's not just the fact that we're using the Analytics Cloud to visualize and calculate and project, but we're using the S/4HANA itself as a single point of truth. And we're adjusting our processes so that we can acquire the data we need from our expense reporting tools, such as flights we now need to enter as in where from, where to, location from, location to, so that we can work out what the kilometers are, and also whether or not we bothered to offset those particular costs. At this point, I shan't bother you any further, but Mark, please show them what does this look like.
To us.
I will give the screen to Mark. So 1 second, and we have Mark on here. So yeah, it pops up on your screen. Very nice presentation so far.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh,
So let me share with you our carbon footprint monitor that we use here at Westernacher. So far, we have successfully implemented 8 of our entities into this monitor. So far, all of these entities do report all carbon footprint information via Excel upload files, and it is planned, of course, to do this in an automated way in this sooner future. What we did is that we, of course, first of all, analyzed our past data. And what you can see here is our carbon footprint for the year 2019. And what becomes pretty obvious when looking at the categories of office, travel, and work is that travel takes the majority of our carbon footprint, which is kind of obvious as we do need to travel a lot by plane to customers, and flights do bring a lot of carbon footprint. In our case, it's about 70% in 2019 that was produced by flying to our customers. If you look at office and work, so our laptops and screens or the utilities for our offices, that were in comparison very low figures. And if we now jump to the year 2020, we will see that the picture changes a lot. So our total consumption of carbon footprint went down by almost or more than the half. And that is, of course, due to the COVID pandemic, where our travel to customers decreased heavily. So you can see here, our flights also went down by more than half. And that is where our total carbon footprint was reduced heavily. Of course, we do not only look on total figures, but we also look at this on a timeline. And in here, I can show to you the first half of the last 3 years, so 2021 to 2019. And you can see that with March 2020, the COVID pandemic really impacted all of us, as we know about. And also our carbon footprint went down as all of our consultants stayed at home or in the offices, did hardly travel at all to customers, and we basically do our business now remotely. And what we can also see is that this is more or less in the first half of 2021 still the case. So our carbon footprint is really low due to the ongoing restrictions in traveling and having meetings together in the same room. As travel is not that much of a big deal at the moment anymore, of course, we need to focus on other areas where we can improve our carbon footprint. And that is actually our office utilities, because the total consumption went down, but the portion of utilities has increased. And therefore, we need to have a look on how we deal with this. And you can see here that we have a comparison of our offices. I have selected a few ones, and you can see it's fairly stable in comparison, with kind of interesting that Barcelona is fairly high compared, for example, to Vienna. And that is that we have a big office in Barcelona with many employees in, and therefore our footprint is actually quite high compared to the other offices, for example, in Vienna or Hamburg. So that is one of the goals that we have now for the future, not only to stay down with our travel carbon footprint, but also reduce our office utilities footprint. And now back to us to give you more insights of what we have planned next.
Thank you, Mark. So could I ask Ava to switch over to me?
Will do, will do.
Thank you. So as you've seen from Mark, there's a few immediate takeaways. And dreadful event that the pandemic was, it has shown us this very interesting fact, namely that, let's see, namely that most of our emissions had been caused by travel, in particular flights. The fact that the US didn't let us Europeans fly over, even if our customers would have let us do so, had a major impact on us. The fact that we were all suddenly doing home office. From that, we'd also learned that we could do a lot of our business with far less travel and with a much more modest outlay, which is something we are going to be taking forward. We can also see, of course, that once we deal with a heavy hitter such as our travel, with our lesser emissions are suddenly becoming much more relevant. That suddenly our actual offices, which we'd somewhat neglected, are starting to appear as major causes of our carbon footprint. And so here we would also see those are things which we need to deal with. So what could we do? Well, obviously, and this is something which we've been pushing for quite a while, but now we realize how important it is we're going to try to travel in a more sustainable way. This would mean if you can take a train, ideally powered by renewable electricity, as you could do within Germany with the ICEs, so take the train to Berlin rather than fly to Berlin, that would be a major saving. Equally, we have a company car policy where we push people more towards, encourage people more towards new electric or hybrid cars rather than diesel or petrol. We can also switch our offices to, again, more sustainable contracts. Must we really have our electricity from a provider which is 50% coal powered? Or could we go for someone who is 100% hydroelectric or wind power? And as we're slowly pushing our footprints down, what can we actually do to offset? Well, this is where, again, we have a few ecological policies where we will be doing our best to make that up. But the takeaway was travel, as we should really have guessed, was high. We just had never realized how high, or that it was possible for us to reduce it and still be in business. So, as I had said, this is not the be-all and end-all of what we're doing. This is the very start of our journey. We are still learning. And as we are going ahead, we're realizing that there are new sources of data we've acquired. There's new things to measure. that we need more transparency, because it's only when we've got this transparency that we can see where our footprint's coming from and also realize what we need to do to reduce it. And I would say we're also at the point where next year we're actually ready to be correctly, independently audited on our approach, because we are providing the data. We're doing it automatically. It's in our systems, the same way we're recording our financial data, our carbon transactions as they are to be there. And we can keep pushing this forward. So as we're reducing our emissions, we're going to find out that there are new areas we need to look at. For example, the question arises, how do we help our customers offset their carbon footprint with our services? It's a good question. Maitland laptops, can they be more sustainable? We have a recycling and renew program we're starting up. We're also looking at the manufacturers themselves, which ones are made more from recycled plastics and components. So there is still a lot we can do, and it's a journey that we're all very keen to keep on taking.
For everybody on the line, feel free. Now is a great time to ask any further questions. And let's see. There is a long question. Are you related to the solution architecture? Are you using a live connection from SAC to the source systems, or are you collecting the data into data warehouse cloud or some similar central database? And where do you store the factors used in the CO2 emission calculations? Long questions. Who is going to take this one?
Do you want or should I?
I can jump in, and then you can also add a bit. So as you already heard, for the prototype, everything was loaded into the analytics cloud by hand because we had to collect things from Excel. We simply didn't know what we needed, and we didn't know where we could even get hold of it. So in our prototype, that was all done by hand. With the real deal, however, we regularly import data from our S4 systems, and we also load some things like emission factors directly into the analytics cloud, simply because SAP doesn't have a standard location for those yet in the central systems. I say at the moment because that could very well be changing over coming months and years. So to answer the question, it's a bit of both right now, and we currently store the factors in the analytics cloud. And if you have a planning license, if you use it for planning, then you can also tweak them directly so that someone like Oliver can rather conveniently explore what happens if we shift a particular office's electricity contract to a different service provider with a different mix, or what will happen if we bring in a new company car policy and everybody moves on to Teslas.
Maybe to add one topic or one comment to what was said, this is that we as a company have been very lucky to have more or less all the source systems already available, like take the expenses tool and the receipts from the expenses tool. They are anyway fed into our central S4 system. So in the S4, we already have the things available and can then do the connection to the SAC, be it a live connection or be it an import connection. That's going to be decided when we build and automate the whole thing and knock it together.
Yes, the first thing you launched, Oliver, had been our timesheet tool to actually collect a bit more travel information, and with our expense reporting to make sure that we had routes in place. This was quite new, we'd never needed them before, so that certain calculations were possible, like a flight from where to where, how many kilometers.
Thank you. There's another question. How do you think the new EU CSRD, which stands for Sustainability Directive, and taxonomy will impact your model? Any impacts to CO2 standard to be used or calculation factors?
Well,
I think this is.
I can take this one up. I think this is a very good question, and especially in Germany, as we also have now a different government with the Green Party being part of the government, it's worthwhile to think even further into how sustainability reporting needs to take place. As you've seen now, we already have taken certain steps. We are definitely not at the end, what you have also heard from Oliver, but we have a good progress at least, and we know the next steps we would like to take. But for sure, we do see that sustainability reporting, carbon reporting will become more and more important. In Germany, we have the case that the taxonomy is even stronger than regulated by the EU. So we have higher prices on carbon certificates. And I definitely foresee that in the future, we will not only talk about operational decision-taking and financial decision-taking, but we will add a third layer, which will then also be about sustainability decision-taking, which will, of course, also impact operations and finance decisions. Because it might, let's take the example of outsourcing. Yeah, you want perhaps to outsource your IT to a different country. You might do this to India. But for example, the energy mix in India is a totally different one than we have this in Germany, or probably also in Finland here, with far more coal emissions included. So your carbon emissions, which would then be your bucket 2, Oliver, I think, would then increase. And with this, you would also then have a higher financial risk coming from this. And the same holds true for your operational decisions. It might turn out that having a project like implementing a new transportation management system turns out for the implementation cost to be very expensive. But if you optimize your operations, you will not only free up resources in your operations, but by freeing them up, by having less trucks spending more kilometers, you will also reduce your carbon footprint. So to put that in a nutshell, I think it's very important, and basically any company needs to now think how to work on the sustainability reporting. And I think for our children's sake, it's anyway worthwhile.
I might just add that this is a moving target. Political situation can constantly change. We've just had a new government in Germany, and our Minister for the Economy is from the Green Party, and he's already shaken quite a few things up. But I think, Alexei, there's also another question we've had in, which is a very good one for Oliver, since he was just talking to us about this the other day. Namely, what are your next steps on carbon neutrality, and what about servers' carbon neutrality?
Yeah, maybe few words about that next steps. We of course want to be regarding GHG protocol. We want to have the right calculations in place by end of March, beginning of April. That's the timeline that we have with our advisors, our auditors, and then write the yearly report for the year 2021. We, as Mark has shown you, and that also shows with using GHG protocol, we reduced over the last 2 years our footprint tremendously, mainly due to pandemic, of course, and restrictions we faced in traveling, but we are also undertaking other measures to keep the footprint low and also to reduce other sources where possible. So, and now we are supporting projects to offset also our emissions from 2021, so to become really also carbon neutral by 2021. And at a certain point in time, we want to be, of course, positive for the environment and have more carbon reduced from the environment or taken off the environment than we are producing. Yeah, so this is the ultimate target, I would say, but that should be reached in the next years as well.
One question that just came in that is connected that you could also touch on, Oliver, is can you give us a number of carbon outputs, for example, your company? So I think that refers to how much roughly you need to think of.
So we are still working on the final numbers and need to get that really audited, of course. But I can give you already a ballpark number, and this is around maximum, I would say, for the whole group. So we are operating with around, let's say, 1,000 people, including our subcontractors, and in 19 countries it was. And with that numbers, we are about maximum 1,500 tons, yeah, per year. So that's what we roughly calculated. Can be a little bit higher, of course, could be a bit lower, but that's the order of magnitude we are talking about.
Can you also share some insights on what costs come out of these emissions if you want to offset this? Just let's have a rough number on this.
This is really interesting because we were a little bit shocked, yeah, that the prices for the certificates to really offset your emissions are really pretty low, yeah. So to offset 1 ton of emissions, we are talking about a price range that our auditors gave us of 5 to 25 euros, which I think is a little bit too low personally, yeah. And that's easily doable. So we are talking, in our example, we are talking about order of magnitude, maximum 35,000 euros if we go with the higher and higher cost certificates, yeah. But it could be 5 times lower, given the fact that the cheapest emission certificates only cost 5 euros per ton, yeah. So also a good sign, so that companies really go into that direction and do support the offset projects that are possible.
Great. We have still time for 1 or maybe 2 quick questions. If you have anything in mind, please feel free to ask. And there is a question on sustainability development for reporting. And also just a bigger question in general, that where do you think the sustainability is going in general?
I think I can add 1 point to what Mark said, because I think this is also driven by the market. Yeah, many of our customers, it's not only governmental and legal activities that are going into that direction for more sustainability, but what we see with our customers is that in big RFP process where we need to show our numbers, our capabilities, and in the selection processes where we are selected as an implementation partner, we already need to show what we are doing in terms of sustainability, and also what we are doing in order to reduce our carbon footprint. So the questionnaires that are coming in these processes, RFP, RFQ processes, are like 50 questions about your sustainability. So this is also driven by the market that you need to go into that direction. There is no choice, yeah. And even if legal requirements might not be as big as they are right now in certain countries, we as a group need to go into that direction anyway. Yeah. It's just from the market.
There is one final question. It's a long one, but
I try to
do you if there's a quick answer for it, but how do you verify the accuracy of the emission numbers you are getting from the activities and services you use? Is it all part of the GHG standard, or do you rely on the data vendors and service providers?
Yes, very good question, and this is really the tricky part, I think, yeah, because in the end you will never have the correct footprint, yeah, because it's just impossible to find everything calculated in a correct way, yeah. But your auditors, they tell you already what you can do or what you shouldn't do, yeah, and this is where we currently rely on. Also, we look into the calculation examples given by GHG. Yeah, you can find them online also. And we try to be as much as possible close to that standard and calculating whatever we need to calculate there. And then by having it audited by a third party is, I think, the step where, like with your financials, where you then get better and better over time. Yeah.
So, thank you very much for having listened to us.